We've got one more talk for you today. Coming up next, we have Wardell Warner, who's a wonderful artist and a friend of mine. His recent series Terraria, has been absolutely blowing up the NFT space on Hic et Nunc. Rodell is a Trinidadian artist working primarily in new media and photography. His works have been exhibited at the Whitney Museum, Museum of American Art in 2016 as part of the Dreamlands exhibition in Lorna Mills's Ways of Something series, and at the National Gallery of Jamaica in the 2016 exhibition Digital, as well as the 10th Berlin Biennale in 2018. Rudell is a recipient of the 2011 Commonwealth Connections International Arts Residency and the 2014 Summer Residency at NLS Kingston. And he was commissioned in 2017 to create the Davidoff Art Edition, a series of 5 artworks printed onto a limited edition of 5,000 boxes of luxury cigars and presented and sold at Art Basel in Hong Kong, Miami, and Basel. Rodell lives and works between Port of Spain and Trinidad, Kingston in Jamaica, and Austin, Texas in the US. I'll turn it over to him and you'll learn a little bit more.
All right. Hi, Gray Area Festival. My name is Wardell Warner, and I'm an artist that makes recently many 3D models of plants, and I use those in my work. I animate them, and I try and find ways to use those models that I enjoy. I make prints and things like that, but I also just like to kind of play with them online. So for Gray Area Festival this year, I'm one of the participating artists, and what I'm doing is installing some of these models of mine in one of the virtual spaces, one of the exhibition rooms, sharing a room with Oria Harvey, whose work I love. And so I just want to talk about some things that I've been thinking about in relation to that installation. I have a few points that I want to kind of hit, and I'm just gonna talk about these things. So just to give you a sense of where we're going with this, I'm gonna talk about, maybe we don't need to do that. I'll just tell you. Okay, so I make these models, and I'm thinking about encounters with nature in virtual space. So I actually started making, when I started making exhibitions, they were photography exhibitions. I was very much into photography, and still I photograph lots of plants. Because of that, I have this like huge reservoir of images of plants that I use when I make models, but also just the images themselves. Before I was making 3D models, I made lots of other types of digital work using images of plants, sometimes taking images of plants and extruding them, blowing them up into 3D forms, sometimes making patterns out of them, just using images of plants basically as like kind of source material and exploring what I could do with that. And so I have this whole history. I feel like my kind of history of making art is kind of very much punctuated by just encounters with plants and images of plants, specifically in virtual space. And so I'm thinking a lot about encounters with nature in virtual space. I should also mention I'm from Trinidad and Tobago, Caribbean islands, twin island state. Trinidad actually, they say, broke off of South America. The closest point between Trinidad and Venezuela is actually 7 miles. You can just get in a little dinghy and zip across. And you can actually see some of the mountains in Venezuela from the capital of Trinidad, Port of Spain, on a clear day. And because I'm from this island that has just incredible biodiversity. And I'm from the north of the island where there's a mountain range, the northern range. I kind of grew up in very close proximity to forests. The high school that I went to is called Trinity College, and it is built like right on the edge of this massive forest. Like you go to school in the morning and there's 3 stories up, there's a transparent frog on the outside wall of the school. The school was built in like the 40s or something. Doesn't have any doors, just has these arches to allow wind to pass through. It means like lots of animals come in all the time. So all these like, incredible insects and the patterns that you would see on their bodies, and lots of school activities involved going into the forest. And also where I live, very much where I grew up is very much a sort of settlement that was carved into a hillside and a valley. That's very rich forest. So growing up and just being in Trinidad for me often involved just being in close proximity to nature. And when I started doing photography, which I kind of got into by accident, I was really into graphic design, but I got tired of paying for stock photos, so I bought a camera so I could take my own pictures. Fell in love with photography and ended up just taking so many pictures of plants. So often my installations and things that I would present would just blow these images up, extrude them, colorize them, make patterns out of them. And I'm really an artist who works with images of plants, even though I didn't really think about it or understand that until very recently. So one of the things that I think about a lot is how in virtual space, in Blender when I'm modeling a plant or when I'm making a pattern in Photoshop or something, I get to experience the plant in a way that I wasn't able to experience it in real life. Often in nature, like when you're outside, there's so much to consider. I don't necessarily feel particularly safe in the forest, which brings me to one of the points that I wanted to talk about, and it's this artwork by Banksy, and it's called Crime Watch UK has ruined the countryside for all of us. And it's this like canvas, this like oil painting of a little house or something, but it's really in a forested area. It's really in nature. And what Banksy didn't make that painting, he kind of bought it at a flea market or something. And what he did paint into it was these like blue and white police, like caution tape, like police, like do not cross lines, this police barrier. And it kind of creates this conversation about the way that forested areas or just like being in the woods or something in popular media is often portrayed as unsafe. Like, if you stray away from civilization, if you stray away from sort of human dwellings, species that people have built, if you go far enough away from that, you get in some kind of trouble. Maybe even the type of trouble where like some random person kills you. There's so many like detective stories, and so his thing is Crime Watch UK. Has ruined the countryside for all of us. So just like the telling of so many stories of bad things happening in nature creates this kind of overwhelming, overarching theme for people in our society regarding nature, that it's unsafe. And I certainly feel that. And in Trinidad, Trinidad media has its own sort of version of that, where there are so many reports or stories of kidnappings and terrible things, killings and things that happen in the forest or things that happen in the bush that really make, even if it's not rational, even if you don't really ever experience it yourself, even if the stories are overblown, sensationalized, and not representative of the general experience. The feeling of being unsafe is created and associated with being in the forest. So one of the things I think about is how much different it is to experience nature in visual space, because there's no threat of being killed or whatever, being attacked by an animal, or I don't know, face-eating fungus or whatever. Like the thing about nature is that it's so unfamiliar, that the unfamiliarity of it makes it scary, you know, like, oh, which brings me to another point. Oh, should I go there now? Okay, so I'm saying that I collect lots of images, I make lots of models, I put those models and images in visual space. The experience of interacting with these models and images, patterns, and so on in visual space is safe, whereas the feeling of interacting with actual plants in nature feels a little unsafe, a little dangerous. So one thing I want to tell you about is when I did actually one time go to this rural area of Trinidad to the northeast. It's called Toco. It's near the sea, but there's also this it's just this huge forested area. It's very sparsely populated. There's not many people there. And I have a friend who is an architect and built a little house for his parents there, and allows artists to go and spend time there just as a way to kind of connect with nature and spend time in Toco. And so one time I was there, and I decided to take a walk, just to not go to the beaches where there are people hanging out, but to go into the forest along a path that I'd passed some days before. And I'd had good experiences. At this time I was just recording images, video of plants and animals, pictures, video of flowers and leaves and insects. And I come across a tarantula. Got this fantastic video of a praying mantis and flew into the camera. I use all that stuff to make little loops and GIFs that I created a sort of immersive experience for an event. So I had this event in mind, and I was going on this walk to kind of collect material to make some images, to make some GIFs. And I go along this path, and at one point I passed like a set of vultures that have kind of like descended on this tree, and they're weighing down all the branches of the trees. There's so many of them in there, and there's like something dead nearby, and there's just this stench of death in the air. And at the same time, it was sunny just a moment ago. All of a sudden, it's like the clouds roll over and cover the sun, and so now all of a sudden it smells like death, and it's dark and cloudy. And I'm on this path, and I'm alone, and I suddenly kind of realize that I've gone far enough away where I don't think there's anybody nearby. And down the path comes racing at top speed a pack of like 12 to 15 dogs, and they're coming directly at me because they're also using the same path I'm using, but they're coming in the opposite direction. And I am just scared shitless, and I don't know what to do. I just kind of freeze and wait, and they just run right past. But I get the feeling, I know that I'm at the mercy of nature at this point. There's no house for me to hide in. There's no weapon for me to use. It's a situation where I'm just one of the things in nature, and I'm not the most well equipped. I'm actually quite vulnerable. And if this pack of dogs, however they came to be, was even interested in me in any way that I didn't like, I wouldn't have much. I mean, I could try, but I would be outnumbered. And that really created for me the sense that, that I'm unsafe, but also of like how the experience of nature, the experience of the world in society really has a lot to do with being protected by human-built spaces. Our cities and places are places where we have like driven all of the other animals out and built whatever barriers we need to build, and have just decimated populations and done what we need to do so that we don't run into wild packs of animals and we can walk around without worrying about it. There are also places where we don't run into like plants and stuff because, you know, we just clear space. The only plants that we really have around are the ones that we feel like we need to keep. But when you go into sort of unmitigated space, just natural spaces, you find all kinds of unfamiliar things, all kinds of things that people don't know what they can be used for and don't know the uses of and don't know the value of, you know, just stuff, just bush plants. On that same path, on the way back out, I ran into some men who paused as they saw me, and I paused as I saw them. I had my camera in my hand, pretty large SLR. I'm not sure what they thought it was. They had cutlasses. I realized that I was on some kind of farmland. I didn't know this at the time, but there were some like marijuana fields past where I had gone. And so it's, you know, the land is kind of, there are some complications to being there. Eventually I was brave enough to approach the men. They were brave enough to approach me. We realized that we were not threats to each other, and we had some kind of friendly exchange, and we carried on. But again, this, you know, looming fear being, and not just for me, for them too, being in sort of unmitigated, unmanaged natural space, creating all kinds of complications. So when I have a 3D model of, so when I was there, I made lots of videos and recorded images of plants in such a way that I could model them. You know, I took a picture from the front, I took a picture from the side. This gives me like a reference images that I can create. That I can create 3D models from. Once I have a front image and a side image, I can create a 3D model. If I have a top image and like a 45-degree angle, I can make an even better, I can do it even more easily. The way I make my 3D models is not by scanning, but by drawing. So they're really drawings, but I'm drawing in 3D space. Lots of people are now drawing in 3D space in like, in just literally drawing in visual space using like maybe like an Oculus, like a VR headset and VR tools. But I'm still drawing with a mouse or a trackpad in Blender in just like 3D editing software. And so I recorded lots of images that I could use at that point on that trip. I forget what I was actually going to say relating to that. Maybe I should just move on to my next point, which is about sort of depictions of nature in virtual spaces. And one of the things I thought about that really struck me, that stuck with me, is Donkey Kong. Donkey Kong Country for, what was that for, PlayStation? I don't remember exactly, but this game, Donkey Kong Country, you play this character, or one of two characters that moves through these sort of platform, it's kind of platformer, move through these like platforms, just levels, avoiding obstacles, attacking, and defending against enemies. And, you know, it can be really stressful.
And you're in the lost world, and all of a sudden, you're dealing with zingers and all these other enemies coming at you all at once. And on top of this, you have to deal with these f***ing barrels that don't want to work right half of the time.
At some points at the end of the game, these obstacles come at you pretty fast. These enemies come at you pretty aggressively. And it's all about your sort of this dexterity and attention and reaction time and stuff like that. There are particular levels in Donkey Kong where you're no longer playing in the jungle as you do in the rest of the game, but you're not playing like underwater. And in these underwater levels, the music changes. So it's no longer like drums, so like Congo drums and stuff, as you will hear in the more like terrestrial levels. In the underwater levels, you hear more like synthesizers and sort of like softer, more gentle sounds, almost like lullaby type sounds, watery sounds. And because you're moving in water, everything's a little more slow, and you get a chance to observe images of plants more. You get a chance to observe all the like sea life, all the marine life, and it's kind of a special thing, because the rest of the game, you know, you're just going through and you're not really like, you're not moving slowly enough to observe anything. You're kind of just trying to get through the level. But when it comes to the water levels, even though there are enemies and stuff, it's way more chill, and you just get to look at stuff more. And the stuff that you get to look at is like, you know, these depictions of natural elements of the world that's built in the game. And so I was thinking about that, about how I felt when I didn't have to, you know, work so hard anymore to avoid danger in this virtual space, where I could sort of spend more time enjoying the environment itself. You know, all of this does connect to what I'm building for Great Area Festival. I'm placing my models in space in ways that I hope people will enjoy discovering, and taking time to observe once they find them. And it's a space that's not dangerous in any way. It's just playful. It's just for enjoying. One other point that I kind of have written down that I want to talk about was my encounters with nature in Jamaica. So in Jamaica, where I've spent some time, lived for a little while in Jamaica, there are way more mountains, and the forests are way more dense, and because there are mountains, you go up really high, and at the higher altitudes, there are just things that don't grow lower down. So there's all kinds of like ecosystems that are foreign to me. I remember one time we were going to a very high point and driving up a very steep hill. And the higher up the hill we went, the more ridiculous looking the plants got. So at first it was just like, you know, there's lots of ferns all over Jamaica. So at first it was just like lots of ferns, lots of vines, fruit trees, things like that. But the higher up you go, start to see like things that look like maybe like cane stalks, but so tall you don't even know how it makes sense that it could stand upright, and with leaves so long that they shouldn't be also standing upright. And then things that like produce flowers that are so bountiful and plentiful that they kind of like bunch up on each other. Or I took pictures, but I can't really describe the things. I'm gonna see if I find any of these pictures that I've taken, and so I can share this. But the thing that blew my mind, seeing like just the ridiculous diversity, being somebody who models plants and has also like thought about fictionalizing plants, but wasn't feeling like I had the authority to do that. Seeing these plants that just look totally ridiculous made me realize that like nature just tries things and ends up with things that look so ridiculous, so playful, so unreal, that there's nothing I could make up or imagine, I don't think, that would appear to be too ridiculous, or that couldn't actually be something that exists in nature, because there is so much, like, that nature produces that it just looks unreal. It just looks so ridiculous. So some of those things were too difficult for me to model the way that they are to draw. I've been drawing in 3D space since maybe 2017. I'm really good at it, but I'm not at the absolute best. There are many people who are just better, and so there are things that are still challenging for me that I it's not that I can't do it, but the amount of time I would have to spend doing that, I probably would choose not to attempt certain things. Often, I'm making something for a show or for a project, and there's time constraints. I wouldn't just want to spend, a year modeling something. But, there exist these things that might as well be fictional, that are real things, I almost said real works of art in nature. Well, that's another thing, in a way, nature's kind of this like generative artwork. And when I look at it that way, I just really enjoy doing that. Anyway, it's probably about time for me to wrap up. I really hope you enjoy what I'm making. And let's talk. I mean, what happens next is that there's a Q&A session, and there's also some time that we can just like chat with each other after the Q&A. And yeah, I would just enjoy, I think, talking about different people's sort of encounters with nature in virtual space, and maybe how those compare to encounters with nature in non-virtual space. And yeah, I just really hope you like what I made. So yeah, let's talk more about this. Thanks for being here. My name's Wardell Warner. Talk to you soon.
And we're back with Wardell Warner, master of virtual plants and creator of digital gardens. How's it going, Wardell?
Wait, it's really good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't believe you blew up my spot a little bit with some of my virtual landscape recordings in the talk, but I appreciate you pointing them out. I mean, as you know, I am obsessed with virtual worlds and virtual landscapes, and particularly virtual nature, and kind of the feeling that it gives you. And I love the way that you're thinking about the relationship between virtual environments and natural experiences and offline natural experiences. And I'm wondering, in your practice of working with these plants and rendering them, kind of what sort of happens in that space between the physical and the digital, like as you're creating these virtual objects and artifacts, what kind of magic is going on as that living thing is converted into something that is zeros and ones?
Yeah, well, first of all, I usually really just love the thing that I'm modeling and kind of in awe of it as its own like sculptural, work. And I'm also often aware that I can't like get as much detail. I can't copy it exactly. So I'm often trying to like just take parts of things that I really love, or maybe trying to make a version of it that I feel is like flattering. But then recently I've been kind of like interested in taking liberties, and sometimes I find my imagination kind of limited compared to things that I find in nature. I feel like it's just some kind of a dance between like, while knowing that I can't actually copy this thing exactly as it exists, working with the limitations that I have, because I am making them by hand, to just kind of make something that feels lovely or delicate or precious in some way. So I'm kind of just like sampling the plant.
I think you touched on something that I thought it was interesting to reflect upon. Well, several things, of course, but one that caught my attention in particular, where you were saying at some point that you did not feel that you, in a way, that you should have the agency of creating these new plants or new flowers or new, let's say, nature in general. And I thought that it was very, very powerful, because then you just started talking about how it was very hard to create something that wasn't already there by nature, right? Because there's
Yeah,
plenty of things that are out there. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, when you came on to that reflection yourself, how did you, yeah, how did you arrive into that? Because I think that some, in a way, at least within the digital world, we talk a lot about fractals, right? And we talk a lot
yeah,
about like these, in a way, algorithms of nature that replicate themselves to create these incredibly beautiful beings, living beings, right? That are
yeah,
super
yeah,
complex. And I don't know if that in a way ties up as well with your work,
yeah,
something between that.
yeah, yeah, totally. Like, so I remember seeing like first of all, there are lots of palm trees in the Caribbean. There's one particular type of palm tree that's so thin, it's, I don't know, it feels like it might just be like the entire tree might just be like that thick. And it goes up into the air like 100 feet into the air, and like it just looks like, and then the palms at the top, and they're always swaying in the breeze, and they bend a lot. And it doesn't look like it should be possible for that to exist. It doesn't look like something should be. No, I can't imagine how you would anchor it. And even if imagine a really elaborate anchoring system, I still can't wrap my head around. And it exists. I mean, that's how it works, right? It has some kind of really secure architecture under the ground that manages to like be stable enough to keep this 100-foot piece of wood like thing in the air. But even knowing that that's possible, I look at it and it doesn't seem like it should work. It doesn't look like it makes sense. And so like if I'm to draw something or make something, I want to make something. I feel like I want to make something that looks like it should make sense. But then in actual nature, there are things all the time you encounter things that don't look like they make sense, but they do make sense. And so like I have so much respect for that. Um, those like apparently clashing realities, that things that look impossible are so soberingly possible, that I don't that it makes me feel like I feel a bit like some reservation to make something that's purely ridiculous, because I'm like, there's things out there that look purely ridiculous, but they actually work. And so I have so much respect for these actually like well functioning ridiculous living sculptures that I'm like, can I even like get involved in this conversation? But I can. That's the thing, because even if mine doesn't work or live or is not as complex or beautiful as a natural thing, it's just a representation. And um, there are things that look really 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 wild, and I can make stuff that looks really really wild. It doesn't have to. Yeah, it's just, I just have so much respect for the thing that I just have a hard time negotiating what I feel I should do. There was a second part of what you were saying too, when you talked about just the fact that they're living, just the fact I mean, so human beings, we're gonna make stuff that we're making stuff that's increasingly complex, and we make stuff that's like, like that's kind of like automatic things, like machines that exist with no wires. Like when you see those like crazy videos of those Boston Dynamics robots, like the Spot dog robot, or the Atlas one, the one that looks like a human and it's doing backflips and all this stuff. Like we're gonna get so much better at um, making organisms um, that it seems like the trajectory that we're on ends up in the same place that nature is in, except nature is like way ahead of us. So I mean, modeling plants and stuff, you just feel like you're part of that. Um, making animated versions of natural things, just feel like you're part of that. But then I just have like incredible respect for nature itself, and what feels like the recognition that we are trying to do the same thing, we're just not that far yet.
And I think in a way is sort of like a process of speculative communication, because we cannot, well, we don't necessarily understand all of the subjectivities that are outside of the human way of perceiving, right? We can only
Yeah.
imagine. But I think that in a way, building or thinking about these systems of life, of creation, and as absurd as they might feel sometimes, like I remember when my parents used to live in Brazil, and there were some crazy insects out there, and I was like, oh my god, like I've never seen anything like this before. And
Yeah.
I couldn't even describe what I was seeing, and by trying to describe that to someone else, not necessarily recreating that only through words, but I thought that there was a kind of, I don't know, like a speculative communication laying, I don't know, like across all of that, like trying to understand something that at first doesn't make sense to me, of course, but then trying to verbalize that, and eventually, well, if I don't know, if I had to draw that, then to create an image for it, and to start sharing from that process of acknowledging this being. I don't know, there's something that I feel can be very strong, not only in understanding what is around us in terms of these all of these systems of non-human intelligences that are coexisting with us, and that sometimes we just cannot necessarily perceive, but not because they are not there or they are not close, but because we just do not have the proper tools for that, the technologies for that. Acknowledging technology as part of thinking about language as a technology, or the developing our own senses as a technology. But I don't know, I think it comes at a very particular point of time as well, trying to reconnect with all of that, and then also understanding the whole current context, of course. I think it is very powerful.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Rodel. Sorry.
No, I just love thinking about this stuff and hearing you say these things. One thing you made me think about. I don't know if you're like off topic here, like there's other things to talking about, but you mentioned those insects and like the patterns on their bodies and stuff. Like it's the way, and maybe just like the way that their bodies are formed and things like that, and also sort of like speculative communication. Like sometimes I wonder if in the intention to replicate or mimic nature, we don't learn things, and so in like in like so just all of these patterns, images, examples as a form of communication. You learn how to make these things, how to make things like these things by trying your hand at describing them. You might be trying to describe them in 3D form in a program where you might be, Vanel, who spoke earlier, was talking about carnival costumes, and there are so many carnival costumes because I'm from Trinidad too. We're from the same place, and carnival is this life giving force in the whole. And you just mentioned Brazil, so you know what I'm talking about, like carnival. So there are so many carnival costume designers and makers in Trinidad, like decades ago, who take inspiration from nature and would make like just gigantic um, mimics of animals, of insects and things. And so I'm thinking of like just a bunch of different practices over a large period of time, analog practices, digital practices that take inspiration from nature, and as you mentioned, this like speculative communication, this like learning that comes out of trying to describe or paying attention to nature. Um, yeah, you just have me thinking about the fact that we learn so many interesting things. I mean, I'm thinking again about these like those Boston Dynamics robots. Like I can't think of how much information, knowledge that's, from humans observing and trying to mimic nature that goes into like Spot the Dog or like the Atlas machine.
I was, in thinking about like, you were talking about how the natural world, um, is kind of in the future. And when you said that, I immediately thought of, I'm based here in the Bay Area. I grew up at the foothills of the Santa Cruz Mountains, and this area is native to the redwood tree, and redwood trees grow in these really elaborate systems where you see a whole group of trees that are really just one organism, and they have these really complicated ways of communicating with each other that nobody really understands. I mean, there's so many stories in California about how the trees, if it gets too dry, send out these signals that call moisture in the air, and based on the kinds of chemicals they're releasing. There's all these ideas about how the redwoods like call thunderstorms and they call rain when they need things, and there's all these like complicated, speculated modes by which these organisms are able to communicate with each other, are able to shape the world around them, and maintain the natural balance that's necessary. And I don't know, I feel that in some way in these works, and particularly in the terrarium pieces. Like these are kind of aligned with that series. These plants cased in these kind of clear, shiny resin or crystalline structures. Yeah, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, the terrarium series and some of the, the mythologies or ideas that you have embedded in these artifacts.
Um, the first one that I made, um, I had a bunch of I didn't really intend to make a vessel to put these models of plants in, but I had a bunch of different plants that I modeled from Jamaica. I had some ferns, I had some palms, and I had there's this tree that has these leaves that when they curl up they make like this really weird shape called a volcano tree, and that tree has this like kind of vine like structure that I had modeled, and I had these models, and I I really like looking at them together, and I just made a sort of crystalline shape, a kind of like little box, and I put them in there, and then I applied a subsurface modifier to that shape, and it made it kind of rounded, and it made it this kind of like egg-like shape, kind of elongated egg-like shape, and I had these models in there, and I could see through the sort of glassy material of the elongated egg-like shape to the all the shapes and textures of the plants. And I don't know why it was so pleasing, but I just couldn't get rid of that image. I printed it in my zines. I made a big poster of it. I put it on my fridge. Um, I was making a deck of tarot cards because my partner Nicole is really into tarot, and I was wondering if I should use one of those use that image for the image for the world card. I also came across images of the world egg, which is this egg with like a snake wrapped around it, but just this idea of like the world egg, just this idea of like all of life that can kind of be encapsulated. And then like you think of like reproductive cells or seeds or spores in this way. And so this image of life encased and protected and just so resonant, just stuck around in my head. I made that first image, which was the first terrarium image in like 2017 or so. And I don't usually keep images around for so long, but I just had that one in my life for a few years. And then when I was trying to find a way to make things, when when the whole uh, NFTs kind of blew up earlier this year, and I was finding that my work, I think images I had made before were kind of specific to communities I'd lived in, but not really resonant in this online community that I was kind of finding myself looking for a place in. Sort of a new, I mean, I've been online making stuff for years, but the amount of the communities that formed around NFTs are new. And I was looking for a way to share images that kind of created an identity for me in the space that I enjoyed, but that also had particular resonance with the people in the space. And I just went back to that image again, and I wondered if I could make a second one. And so I took some other models of plants and encased them again. I had the same feeling of, I don't know why it's so resonant. I don't know why so many other people like relate to it so much, but something about it just something about it is precious, and I'm just gonna keep doing them. I mean, I even tried doing other things. I put a new, like I started these, I minted something new the other day. Like not a single person bought it. Like nobody cared. But I'm pretty sure next time I'm making a terrarium, lots of people are going to care. So I've just found a really resonant thing, symbol or something that people enjoy and that I can't get enough of. So I'm going to keep making those.
They're beautiful, and they, these pieces are like, they really spoke to me in the context of this show diorama, because they're kind of these like frozen moments in time that feel permanent yet ephemeral, that are solid yet somehow ghostly, and they feel like relics of some kind of future we've yet to see. And I don't know, there's something just really really special about them. um,
Yeah, now that you mention it, just that, like thinking of seed banks, thinking of like, we had this latent feeling that we don't know how long the earth is gonna last, and these feel like bits of earth that might be preserved or something. That there's that as a facet of I feel like something of that is in there as well.
Totally. This image that we're looking at right now, this is this is the original Terrarium 14. The a version of this sculpture is on view as part of the New Art City show, and if you find it, it's the portal into the world that you built with Aurea Harvey. I would love to know a little bit. We were talking to Aurea the other day, but I'd love to know, from your side, like what that collaboration was like and what the two of you were, trying to accomplish together in your installation.
So first of all, I love Aurea's work. I only discovered Aurea's work like this year. It's like I and she makes so many things that feel so precious that, and then the context, she goes to all these like ruins, or like even museums which kind of feel also like ruins when they're filled with sculptures from hundreds and thousands of years ago, and she projects her own like augmented reality, like AR versions um, of her sculptures in those spaces, and they fit, but they feel like they're from now, and it feels like those spaces existed for thousands of years just for Aurea to project her AR sculptures into them. And like, I don't know, I can't say enough about like how much I admire her work. So to have the opportunity to work with her on this, I just wanted to be cool about it. Like I just wanted to not freak out and do something that we would like. So we met on Discord, just had a call one time, and she's so cool, like literally like chill, like there like no spikes in her like blood pressure or anything. Like she's just like so cool. And we talked about I don't remember much of what we talked about, but I remember at one point we were discussing this idea of like spaces that feel safe, like feel where you can experience nature, but you don't have to worry about anything. I also remember us talking about, she'd shown me like, so she got into the room before I did and started building, and all of these where you see all of these images of these, like what she calls her uh not star children. Yes, she calls them her star children. So each of these figures, these like humanoid figures in a star shape, was not one of these, but was just an actual five-pointed star. And it wasn't an enclosure like this. It was just like she had just taken like a large image, a large transparent image of like a grid of stars, and she just spread it over a space and like made a sky. We talked about like what to do with the floor, with the ground. I remember us describing like musing over the fact that like we're talking about this ground as it is ground. It's not ground. We're not. It isn't real. And what if we made it transparent? And what if we don't even have the ground? Let's get rid of it. She found a way to get rid of it completely. Um, And so it was a room that you would fly around in, and I had my sculptures kind of, and we also got this fog in there, and so the fog would obscure everything, and so I had my sculptures, my models kind of really far spread out from each other, and the sky that she made was a kind of path, because it's like this infinite space. You come into the room and it's just, there's no floor, you can't see anything because it's just fog, and there's nothing to guide you anywhere except for the stars that she. If you look up, you just see her stars, and so that the stars have formed a kind of pathway, and I just placed my models along the path and sometimes off the path. So this thing that you would find. So we had made this kind of game where you kind of like walk around in this space and use the stars to find these objects that are kind of hidden in the space. But we just kept playing with it. And I wanted to upload terrariums in here, but I could not get the glass to render properly. Like it would always come out solid. You couldn't see through it, and so I couldn't get my little glass enclosure. And Oria must have had some kind of epiphany or something, because one day I went in there. She was like, check out the room. I went in there, and she had built an enclosure. I didn't even realize I was inside of something. Like I got in there, I thought that line that looks like the horizon, which is like one, I don't know, it's just a reflection or something. I thought I was the horizon, so I thought I was in this infinite space. And as I try like going towards the horizon, I realize, wait, no, I'm inside an enclosure. And then I get on the outside of it, and it's transparent. And I realize Oria has built a terrarium. First of all, she got some transparent material in there. She's like a wizard with materials. And it's also this huge object, which I don't know how she did either, because there are some limitations on the size of the files that you can upload, and I don't know how she did that. But she took that room that we had, that infinite space that we had made, where like you're just looking for stuff under the night, stuff under the stars, and she had made instead this like world egg, this terrarium that you're inside of, and she'd placed my sculptures in there. I didn't even change anything after that. I was just like, I was just in awe. I just enjoyed it so much. So it was just this like process in which we just tried some things and had some conversations and changed what we were doing, changed the things that each other did, and she made the final moves, and she just put some master strokes on it, honestly.
No, it was so beautiful to see this collaboration, and I want to note that the space that Aurea built, in contrast to Rodell's terrariums, she calls it a stellarium, and so I think that that's a really beautiful confluence of both of your work together.
Yeah, and also to experience like how can we think the experience of being within nature, but within these virtual landscapes or these virtual spaces. And I think that is something that is also very interesting, because, like you said also in your talk, we are in a way already kind of I don't know, like we already know, or we already think we know how we can experience nature, but then once we start building and creating and developing these other ways of experiencing nature within or through these technological devices, let's say screens, and let's say headphones, and even sensors or whatever, I think it has to create a different conversation, and this definitely does. And I think it is something that is just absolutely stunning to be part of, and I think it connects also with different sense of a scale, which is something that I think can trigger a series of very particular sensations and ways of exploring and moving through the space. I don't know. It's the kind of piece that I'd like to either swim across or kind of like fly through it.
Yeah.
And I think it gives that experience, even though I'm experiencing this through a device. But I think it is something that, I don't know, it connects with other sensibilities, and I really, really like how it builds this narrative together. Also, I know that of course, collaborating also is a series of negotiations, but also a series of I don't know, I guess. Thoughts that being put together create a narrative that none of the parts of this collaboration necessarily expects from the beginning, and that unexpected bit of it, I think, makes it very interesting in the end.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I'm so happy you like it. So happy you enjoy it. That's what we were hoping for.
And just to tack on to what Doreen was saying, I think as well that, what we've been talking also about at the festival is that we can't really dissociate the physical from the virtual, the IRL from the URL. I mean, everything is interdependent, and anything that we do in a virtual space is real. And, even though you mentioned that these are just symbols of plants, not actual plants, I still think that in a lot of ways, your work points back to the natural world. It points back to this kind of embodied rootedness in the world around us. And the being encapsulated in glass. I mean, it feels like a metaphor for a future relic of a plant that no longer exists because of climate change or because of some other kind of natural disaster. And in so many ways, this piece to me is a metaphor. It's an allegory. Allegory is probably a better word, from somewhere else. But it also makes me, I look at your terraria and I want to go outside. Like I want to go take a walk and go like touch a tree when I see them.
Yeah.
And I think that's really powerful because, yeah, it's not the kind of piece that just like entraps you in a virtual world. It almost like reflects you back and is like, no, actually, like you can look at this image, but like go out, like, water that monstera plant that's on your balcony, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Okay.
When I first got in there, so Ori is the one that made that encapsulation, right? And when I got in there, I got in there, and I thought what I saw was a horizon, and I thought it was like infinite space. As I realized that it was actually an enclosure, which is the opposite of infinite space, I realized that I was tricked. Like there was this illusion that was created where like I thought I was in an infinite space, but actually it was an enclosure, and the fact of the enclosure is what created the illusion of the infinite space. And it tripped me out. Like I wrote a long thing in Discord, like in response, and I was like, am I like over? I had a little crisis because it made me imagine the real world, and how you look into the distance and you see the horizon, and you look at the stars, and you think, oh, it's infinite, or whatever. But like Aurea just showed me that like a container could create the illusion of infinity, and I was just like, it gave me a little. I was like, well, what am I in right now? Like, the thing that we're looking at that seems infinite, like, is it really a container? I mean, not that even matters that much, but the fact of the possibility of the illusion of a container seeming to describe infinity really kind of blew my brain. So you're saying that you look at my terraria and it makes you want to go outside, and you're making a connection between this digital work and how it kind of makes the world, how it relates to your perception of the world and how you want to interact with the world. And like I had that experience with this work too, as a result of Oria's input into it. So yeah, you just made me think of that, and just want to tack that on there.
And I don't know, I'd put it the other way around as well with this quote by, I think it's Alan Watts, that says something like, nothingness is really like the nothingness of a space, which contains the whole universe. Yeah.
That's awesome. Wardell, we're just out of time for tonight. We've run over, but this was so wonderful to learn more about this work, to learn more about your practice and your relationships to the natural world. I think that there's a lot that we can learn about plants. We're thinking at Worlding Protocol about interspecies dependence, about the interconnectedness of all things, and the, finding knowledge in non-traditional places, looking to the world, looking to ancient histories, looking at indigenous knowledge and what that can show us. And so thank you so much for helping to exemplify that. It's been really great to have you.
Yeah, thanks so much for inviting me, Wade. Like, when we first talked about doing this, I thought it would be cool, but this was just extra cool. Like, I enjoyed it so much. So, thanks, and thanks for this conversation tonight. Like, I really enjoyed it. Thanks, Doreen.
Thank you for the wonderful talk and the wonderful work as well.